Thanks for joining us at Landor's office. Tell us a little about your background in marketing and PR and your role at Landor.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to talk to you. I started in marketing and branding on the advertising side at Ogilvy many years ago, and then went over to Lever Brothers and learned how to market packaged goods. And I've been at Landor now more than 15 years and worked on branding for all sorts of companies and organizations, from consumer to corporate, and of course airlines.
Right. Now, what do you consider as Landor's distinct advantages? Because you've worked with a lot of airlines as well.
I think our big advantage in the marketplace is the ability to take complicated ideas, find what's a sharp way to, what's a core promise that the company can deliver on,
right.
What's a core idea, and help companies crystallize that thinking, and importantly today, help them execute it so that the customer can experience. Oftentimes, companies are very good at saying, here's what we want to promise, right. And not very good at translating that into a powerful execution.
Right. Now, you mentioned complications and brand complications. Now, airlines are probably some of the most complicated products out there.
That's why we love airline branding programs, because they are the ultimate challenge. Because
right.
You're dealing with multiple touch points, and the airline promise can fall apart at any one of those touch points.
Right.
And to really deliver a great branded experience, you need a very clear, sharp idea, but more importantly, you need spectacular execution.
Right.
You need to be able to deliver that experience on the bag of peanuts at check-in, and when you're getting your bags.
Right. Now, how is airline branding different from branding for any other company?
It's not different in theory, it's different in execution, right. Because you rely on so many people in so many functions to deliver a cohesive experience. It makes control of that experience or orchestration of that experience very hard, right. Because so many people are involved in it that it's the ultimate. We look at it, besides Disney World as the ultimate branding challenge, right. Airlines is probably the second most complicated thing, far more difficult than if I'm selling you a coffee and all I have to worry about is making sure it's hot but not too hot to burn your hand, right. And delivering it on time. Right. So it's a huge executional challenge, is to deliver the airline brand experience.
Interesting. Now, how do you overcome this execution challenge? How do you work with airlines? Well, they're kind of rigid and old-fashioned in that sense. So how do you actually execute with them?
Well, it's challenging because airlines typically are operationally run, which is critical to their survival, and that's important in many dimensions. But they're not marketing customer-led. And so oftentimes when you're looking at who owns the customer experience in an airline, there are many people in many different departments that own a segment of it, but no single group that typically owns the customer experience from the first time they touch the airline till the last time they touch the airline. And because there's not one person like it at Disney, which is, there's not one person who's director of customer experience, except there's a Disney person now, I believe, at Delta. Because they're not looking at it horizontally, it's very hard to execute and deliver a cohesive experience.
Right. Now, do you know of any examples of airlines you've worked with which have got this right?
Well, typically the ones that have gotten it right recently have done a couple things. One, they've gotten a very simple promise. I mean, I think it's been over-talked about, right. But it's a promise they can deliver on all the time, which is key for branding. It's branding in one. Make a promise and deliver on it, especially in this digital world. Right. If you make a promise and can't deliver on it every day, you're toast. Yep. So, Southwest makes a very low-key promise. We're going to provide reliable, safe transportation to get you from A to B. Right. We're not going to, massage your back. We're not going to serve you gourmet meals. Yep. We're not going to provide, first-run movies. And so the promise is low. And so their focus is on consistently delivering it. Right. And since they have one aircraft type, and they have a simpler operation, they're able to consistently deliver it. The other thing is it's top-down. The CEO, everyone gets what the promise is. And they're a smaller airline startup, so you're able to start with a clean slate of paper, no legacy, no problems, no employee groups who didn't want to be acquired and are now part of your company. Right. Very simple. Also simpler at the top.
Right.
When you're at the very premium end of the market, everyone's talked about Emirates, but when your promise is we are the best, and you have the ability to deliver the best because you've got the best, the newest aircraft, the right suites, then you have a chance. It's the muck in the middle that becomes very hard.
Right. Now, you just mentioned this thing about employees being baggage from the past or being acquired. Now, how is it that airlines can tap on employees as internal branding and being brand ambassadors?
But that's, that if they had to, if one thing could change in the airline business, it would be if they could get their employees to deliver the right brand. So there are two parts to that. One is what they do, and airlines, do a pretty good job at driving information down so people know what they're supposed to do, from the check-in person to the on-flight people. But in branding, how you do it makes all the difference. Right. Because if I'm telling you at check-in that, I'm sorry, your flight's been canceled, and I just give you the facts, and say, sorry, the next flight's in 4 hours, that's the what. But there's no brand message there. The how is, if I delivered it with a sense of sympathy, if I delivered it with a sense of caring about you, if I delivered it with a sense of humor, what I did, how the experience was, makes all the difference. And it's very hard to go, the what is challenging enough, here's what you need to do. Great branding organizations, like Disney, like others, develop a how. Now, or even like FedEx, part of why we work with FedEx, is so successful is that they got the what down very well, but they have the how, because the senior leaders, from the top down, know what it's like to put the packages on a plane. At Christmas, everyone has to go through and load airplanes and do that because they stay close to the customer.
Right.
All the employees stay close to the customer. One of the other challenges in the airline business is that as you go up in the airline organization, you tend to forget what it's like to fly as cattle. Right. And it's not, they're very busy people, and because of that, there's a disconnect between what the real customer experience is and what people inside the airline organizations think they are.
Right. Now, with the advent of the online world and Web 2.0, your book comes in at a very good time. Tell us a little about your book on digital branding.
It's called Brand Digital, and the basic premise is that the theory of branding has not changed that much. Everyone got very hung up on let's be on social networking and should we be blogging, and those are all great tools, but the underlying principles of what it takes to build a great brand have not changed. That is, understand what your customers want, deliver it, and consistently deliver it, and then you'll have a great brand. Right. Digital has put a magnifying glass on that. Right. So, for example, it's always been important to understand what's on your customer's mind. Now digital makes it really easy because they're online, they're talking, they're telling you what's on their mind. You don't have to go to a focus group in Cleveland to listen to them. Just get online and they're listening. So your ability to listen, to be a fly in a wall through digital, is one of the big advantages, that you can stay much closer to your customers. Right. The other thing is you can have a conversation with them. It's gone from let me interrupt you and tell you about myself to, hey, I see you're about to book a flight. Would you like me to help you? And I could get into a one-on-one conversation. So becoming conversational is another change for digital.
Right. Do you have some examples you can share with us about airlines that have successfully tapped on this online medium?
Well, I think the challenge with airlines is they're going into the digital space with sometimes the wrong headset. Oftentimes they look at digital and say, here's a great way we can take people out of the experience and save money. And if the headset is, here's how we're going to save money, and yes, kiosks can take people out of check-in and you can save costs, and there are some ways that can happen. But if they went in with a headset, how can digital make my customer's life better, and how can we make the experience better, then there will be truly capturing the power of digital. How can we better deliver on our brand? And some airlines are doing that as they learn to use digital. A big challenge for airlines, I don't want to get too technical, is that a lot of the technology that they have is so old inside and they put companies together that even if they want to use digital to tell you that your flight is 2 hours late, but there's another flight coming in, and I know you like tuna fish sandwiches, and there's a place down the Concourse C, to get that to work on top of old legacy systems is very hard. And Delta, I think, they've made a pretty good investment recently in getting the infrastructure up. And now the challenge is how do they deliver messages? But clearly, when you're traveling, digital is a perfect application because you have the most people who travel on business have whether it's a BlackBerry or an iPhone in their hand,
Yep.
you know, when there's a problem, you can be there and have a dialogue, and I think that will come. I just think it's going to take time.
Yeah. Now, one of the things that have happened with online, everything going online, is brands have tried to control their brands online. How much do you think this is feasible? Is it actually possible to control a brand online?
Well, I think that's the other challenge that many companies face, is that, of course, digital means that transparency is everywhere. You know, you can't be the Wizard of Oz and hide behind the curtain anymore.
Yep.
And you either put out the information or someone else will. So, you know, I love the example of, you know, seatguru.com. You know, very simple idea that you can, you know, find out which are the right seats to get on your plane.
Yep.
Clearly, if they had asked travelers, you know, what's the most important thing to them, it is, you know, how do I prevent, you know, getting the seat that doesn't go back next to the men's room on a plane. And that's something the airlines could have provided.
Yep.
They had that information. When I booked on an airline, I could have done that, and they could have told me, don't get these seats, get these seats. But they didn't. Somebody else had to do it.
Yep.
And so they need to get into the headset of, look, that information's out there. We'll be better served. Let's put customer reviews up. Let's put, you know, now the challenge with customer reviews in airlines is that airlines for years have been the whipping boy of everybody.
Right.
And particularly the media. You know, you know, the JetBlue scenario from last year.
14th of February.
Yeah, and that could have happened to a number of airlines. And I think it got worse because it was in New York and the media was in New York.
Yep.
But it was so overblown because they've been the whipping boys. And because they're the whipping boys, you know, there's a tendency to try to hunker down and not, you know, put up a bad review. But it's out there anyway. And so digital says it's transparent. Your job is to make it transparent. And you either give it to them or they'll get it somewhere else.
Right. Now, one of the things that with this transparency and whipping boys that you've brought up is recently when airlines increased baggage charges and second bag charge and every charge for every single thing that was not attached to the plane, the media, online as well as offline, just whipped them apart.
And I think they deserved it. The reason is because they knew, you know, they were not thinking about the customer. They were looking at, you know, business realities in a world of, at least this summer, of huge, you know, oil prices, because they know that people shop for tickets by looking online at the lowest fare.
Right.
And then once you book that fare at $189, you're locked in, and then they can, you know, get you at the airport and say that bag's $15, that's $12, and you know, totally, you know, piss you off.
Yep.
That's another reason I think Southwest understands branding, you know, and in their particular new campaign, because, you know, the experience at the end of the day is I paid for the ticket. And, you know, you're not going to get nickel and dimed on baggage. So I think they're solving a short-term business problem by generating revenue, which they have to.
Right.
But they're creating a longer-term brand problem because they are eroding any sort of confidence and trust and say, I want to do business with you again.
Right. But there's an argument that I've often heard is, what is the point of maintaining a brand when you can't even sustain your operations? Right.
Well, that's the other thing is that, you know, brands are important as promises that you can deliver on. But if you can't deliver on the basic promise of having airplanes that go from, you know, so branding in the category has tended to be cosmetic. There's been a tendency to say, oh, let's just you know, run some new ads or new line, or you know, fly the fun skies of blank. And you know, the consumers are so jaded that I think all that stuff hits the wall and drops off. So I think any airline branding that can be successful today has to be back to basics.
Right.
Either a very simple promise or a more complicated promise, but before you make the promise, deliver on it, which is part of our philosophy at Landor Crossman. The best branding happens inside out. You find out what you want to promise, you make sure your company can deliver it, your employees know how to deliver it, you deliver it, you make sure it's working, and then you make it to the marketplace. Not the other way around. Run the ad, and then worry about how we're going to deliver it.
Right, right. Now, another thing we've often heard is that the product is the brand. Given the scenario that we're currently in, is the brand more important than the product or the other way around?
Well, you know, the best products and brands are really interwoven. And this becomes a mess because when brand becomes a function of the marketing department and product development becomes a function of the product development department, which happens at a lot of companies, there is a natural disconnect because then all you're doing is wrapping the product in a cosmetic branded experience. This is fun. The best brands are driven top down, which is why companies that do brand well have a CEO, whether it's Pepsi or Disney, that is the chief brand marketer, that then says, here's the brand idea for ESPN, here's the brand idea for blank. And then it's the product development people start with saying, well, here's a promise we're going to do. And the product development people design the product to meet the brand, not the product is delivered to the marketing group, and they've got to figure out, all right, now what do we say about this product that will get somebody to buy it?
Right. Interesting. Now, one of the interesting business models that's been emerging lately in the airlines is mega carriers, Delta plus Northwest, there's Air France and KLM, and more of these coming up. Kingfisher and Jet Airways in India. 2 days ago they announced it. How do you think brands will be impacted through these mega mergers? Because there are two entities that are trying to integrate operations. How can they succeed?
Well, I think branding becomes less important because you don't know what you're buying when you put these two, other than a big anonymous experience. So I think the mergers need to be successful, have to solve part of the business problem. Can they get scale to become efficient and survive? And can they become a healthy business? Because if they're just big and still losing money, it's irrelevant. But if they succeed in creating the right scale, then they can go back once the operation is working and say, all right, now we've got this scale. What sort of promise can we make as this big airline that would be different, that people will care about, that we could deliver? So I think branding will be less important in the short term for these big companies. The first job will be putting these two giants together, and then figuring out how to get them to work, getting the what to work, then figure out how we do it. And then you can put a promise on top one day and hopefully differentiate. Because ultimately you'll have the same challenge. You'll have two big choices. They'll have the same cities, the same routes, the same aircraft, and you'll have somebody making a decision. And if the only decision they make is, well, I'll just buy the one that's $289 versus the one that's $299, then they're in a lose-lose game of a commodity game, and they'll never win. But once they get that footprint right, then they can say, well, what do we want to make different about our experience? How can we treat our customers differently, other than just better, than the other guy? And then I think branding will come back into the market. Branding will, of course, always be there for smaller companies because they have much more control. And if you've got a small niche, which is why Virgin is successful, it's a niche. It's a small airline, and they can make a very tight promise to those travelers between New York and London and deliver on it. They don't have to worry about getting 14 planes to Cleveland in a snowstorm. Right.
Now, you just mentioned this thing about small and scale and how it's easier to control the brand. So let's compare Virgin Atlantic, which is small, limited, and delivers great. And let's compare Emirates, which is going to have 58 A380s with 3 different configurations and different brand experiences across three planes. Do you think it matters how big the airline is, and how do you think they can control it?
It becomes more difficult the larger it is, the more difficult it is to control that experience. I think that the challenge for Emirates will be as they drill down and go from the super premium down to more of a mass appeal, what part of the promise gets skinny down? Because if you're looking at ads for a beautiful suite on an Emirates plane, and then you're in row 75, middle seat, that it takes you 4 hours to deplane because there are 600 people ahead of you, you'll quickly get to the point where, there's a disconnect between somebody's promising more and delivering less. It's as basic as that. They've got to promise less and deliver more.
That's right. Now, one of me being a cattle class traveler as of now, one thing I experience is that the brand experience in US airlines is very different from brand experience in any other international airlines. And do you think US airlines can actually catch up to what the international guys are doing, and what needs to be done?
Well, it's going to be a long haul because I don't know, airline pun intended. Just because there's so many things to get fixed before you worry about branding. So I think in the U.S. they've got to get to a stable, profitable business model, because to build a brand you have to be able to invest in the business, particularly on the people side. Because if you are constantly squeezing costs out of your people, no matter how sensitive you are as you do it, if you're whether it's pilots or flight attendants or baggage handlers, if you're constantly squeezing costs there because you need to get more efficient, and they are the #1 deliverer of the brand experience, it doesn't matter if you've got a great brand promise, you'll never be able to execute it, which is why a lot of our philosophy now at Landor is execution is 80% of the game is execution. So yes, which brand promise you make is important to figure out how to say it and how to get it sticky and fun and memorable. But at the end of the day, what can you execute great is the key driver. And if you can't execute it, don't make the promise. And I think for now, until the U.S. airlines get the what down, they shouldn't really get hung up in the how, even though they have to sort of try to position. I think getting the business model fixed, which will happen. The marketplace will drive to more efficient aircraft. Technology will help. Even though you want the technology to make it simpler, it will also make it more efficient. And with any luck at all, oil prices won't climb back up to $200 a gallon, because then no matter what happens, it's going to be hard to $200 a barrel. It's going to be hard to make the numbers work.
Right. Now, one of the things is that a lot of promise that is made in print ads and websites is not really communicated at point of sale or service on the peanut bag, as you mentioned, or the check-in counter. So how can airlines attract customers while setting realistic expectations? Because employees might not be happy, something else might be wrong.
Yeah, if there was a simple answer, people would have done it. The funny thing is, travel is always a great experience. When you think about travel, it's a very positive experience. People, look forward to it, but they also know that the bottleneck they have to go through to get to that white sand and green water is not going to be a good experience. So there's potentially an opportunity there, because expectations now have been battered down so far that if anyone does the basics right, you go into this with such fear that this is going to be a total nightmare if you're traveling during it. Now maybe a recession might actually, in some way, help the airline experience, because maybe they won't have oversold every flight, and with a few more openings at the gate, they'll be able to more often deliver an acceptable experience. But I really think it starts with the best brands are built on business strategy that works. If your business strategy is not working and your brand doesn't pay it off, it doesn't make it. Then it just becomes branding, which is cosmetically covering a problem.
It's just a cosmetic experience.
And so to build a great brand, you need a great business model. And so I think the first job for most airlines is to figure out how to operate profitably, consistently, and make it a profitable, rewarding experience for all their employees. Because then they can get back to the spirit of in the movie Catch Me If You Can. One of the things I liked about that movie was that there was that magic about, and the employees felt it. When they cast the people going through the Miami terminal back in that movie, you could see in the pilots and the flight attendants, they were proud to wear whatever airline it was, and they were charged to do that. Much like FedEx employees, are really, will do whatever it takes to deliver that package. They are, FedEx employees, are, unbelievably loyal, unbelievably passionate. They celebrate the story of the FedEx driver who, walked 50 miles through the rain to get a gallon of gas to deliver the package. And because they have that passion in the culture, the brand promise is delivered. And until the airline business can get back to have its employees be, passionate and feeling like Catch Me If You Can.
Pan Am style.
Right. It's their ability to deliver a surprisingly delightful experience is going to be a long time coming. Right.
Now, let me move on a little to benchmarking here. So Interbrand releases this top 100 brand index with Business Week every year. Interestingly, this year there was not even a single airline in the top 100 brands.
Right.
Now, what's a good way to measure and rate airline brands?
It's very hard. First of all, there are all these surveys, as you know, that measure. But I think consumers are jaded because they don't, whether they believe the source, or even airlines. I've heard airlines don't look at them very. They'll take the award, the ranking, the most delightful carrier in the Caribbean, and they'll market it. But I don't think there's. I don't think there's any good benchmarking right now, and I think the Interbrand study is pretty accurate, because compared to what's going on in other categories, if you look at the hospitality side, there really is a different experience with some of the hospitality brands that are able to, have profitable operations and have employees and deliver an experience.
Right.
While everyone touches airline brands, which is the other thing we like working on, because if we do a great branding project for an unbelievable piece of technology that's inside a computer, it would be sort of interesting to hear about. But when we do a branding project for an airline, everyone knows it because you can see it and you can live it. And so I'm hoping that the airline business comes back and that we can get back into airline branding in a bigger way, because it is the ultimate branding test. It is. If you do that right, it's I think it's a World Series, if you would, or the World Cup of branding, because like Disney, when you visit a Disney park and they do it right, you realize, boy, they got it down to every one of those cast members. How do they do that? And when you go behind the scenes, as you know, it's massively complicated. Down to the who wears the mouse ears and who doesn't.
Right. Now, what do you think is the future direction of airline branding in general in the field?
I think they're going to be value brands, super premium brands, and then two other types. I think a business brand and a leisure brand. In general. So if I'm vacationing, I'll either go value or a fun leisure thing, or if I'm a serious business person, I'm going to want blank. And I think whether that's I don't think it's going to be a class of service. I think certain airlines will become known as great for travel with 17 kids and the DVD player, and other airlines will get known as if I have to get to Cincinnati on a business meeting, it's not going to be terrific, but I'll take that airline because
it's on time.
Right. There'll be less of that. I love that. There's an American Express print ad that has Larry David, who is a writer who did Seinfeld, and who's also got the Curb Your Enthusiasm show on HBO, sitting in the middle seat, with some kid pounding on his head. And I think that's a powerful ad because that's people's impression of what it's going to be like to fly on business on most airlines. Right.
Interesting. Now, just to close this off, I have a radical question of sorts. Just last week, there was a professor at HBS, at Harvard Business School, Professor Silk, I think. He published a report saying that advertising for the hospitality industry should be in-house, and all branding should be in-house because they understand the brand better than anyone else. How true do you think that is?
It's an interesting idea. Why I think it's not perhaps the best is because sometimes you need an outsider to be objective. When you're inside, you can't really be objective as to what you're good at and what you're not. And I think outside firms sometimes have a more customer-focused. You may think you're the most fun resort, but I don't think we're seeing that. The other is the huge clutter in the marketplace for communication. And that if you don't do spectacular execution today, it doesn't get sticky. People don't remember it. And to get people to do spectacular execution is really hard. And if I have to do a great ad for a hotel, and that's all I do my whole life is one ad after the other, you might find people who are talented, but you won't find really terrific people. The really terrific people want to do a few hotel ads, then they wouldn't mind doing a dog food ad, and then they want the entertainment of doing an American Express ad. And so I think it gets down to where do you find the best talent, creative talent, to take strong strategic ideas and make them magic. Because in this cluttered world, if you don't have that powerful execution to break through, you may have the best story in the world, but no one's going to see it. So I think there's a bit of truth that the best brand communication is when you really understand the essence of the company, and you don't put something cosmetic on top. However, I think you have to balance both understanding the inside and having a real good sense of what's on the outside with that final missing ingredient, which is, do you have that piece of magic that can break through and become viral? And did you see that piece of communication, or what Ritz-Carlton is doing, or what Lufthansa is doing?
Great. Thanks for the brilliant insights you've shared with us today, Allen.
I've enjoyed it.
Really appreciate it.
I look forward to speaking to you in the future.